everyone told me, like, why can't you just get it together? Why can't you stick to one thing? And hey, if you stick to one thing, look where you can be in 10 years. You can be an expert. And, they were all pretty invalidating. And then I got into thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can't I be like everyone else who sticks to that same job for 20 years in a company? And it wasn't until like I had all these scattered notes and post-its and self-help books about jobs that I'm like, okay, there's a pattern here that I'm trying to figure out. And I can't just always be moving all the time. What's going on? I think I remember typing all these symptoms in a Google box one time, Google search. And then I was like, and then ADHD came up. And then was like a light bulb moment. I was like, oh my God, this thing exists? So I've never ever heard about it before until like I was pretty like well into the 14th job in the 6th country.
ADHD Rewired, episode 374. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, you can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups, and you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Kate Engel. Kate is a psychotherapist, coach, consultant, and business trainer. Kate has worked in nonprofit, private, and academic sectors in 6 countries. Her ADHD has taken her on global adventures to examine how mental health issues manifest across cultures. She completed her postgraduate studies in counseling at the University of Pennsylvania and currently has her own private practice in Philadelphia, where she specializes in treating ADHD, OCD, phobias, and social anxiety. She is committed to helping people with ADHD manage their executive functions, perfectionism, and emotions so they can become their best selves. And you can find more about her, and we'll leave the website again at the end of this conversation. It's at kate-engel.com. Kate, it is great to finally have you on the podcast.
I know. Thank you for having me, Eric.
So just to give a little context of our relationship here. So Kate is also adminning in our current coaching season of coaching groups. And when I emphasized finally coming on the podcast, because we had done our pre-interview, it was about a year ago.
Yep, that's right.
And you said you help people with perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
And you were also, before we hit record here, you were sharing with me why it took so long for us to actually have this interview. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. And so, yes, I help people with perfectionism. And here I am telling you, I am also pretty much imperfect right here because perfectionism doesn't disappear. And the reason it took me a year to schedule this podcast interview was perfectionism, a whole lot of it, and the impostor syndrome. And Eric always talks about the itty bitty shitty committee. Well, it was in full force. And the itty bitty shitty committee was saying, you're not good enough to be in this interview.
So what was it that helped you finally combat that?
Telling myself I'm imperfect.
And being okay with that.
and being okay with that. Yeah, exactly. And just like still being a perfectionist in recovery, saying that Eric's imperfect. He has tons of guests of ADHD who are imperfect. So why can't you be in the podcast, you little imperfect self?
So your journey of ADHD has taken you across the globe.
Yep.
When were you first diagnosed?
Actually was diagnosed 2018 at my college counseling center. And I'm sure they knew it was ADHD when it took me 6 months before I turned all those reports in.
For the actual evaluation.
The actual assessments, yes. And then my mom, I'm pretty sure she has ADHD. I sent her the forms too. And that was also probably a part of it. Yeah. And I told my friends that I think that might have been the biggest test in our assessment is when will you get these forms in? Because we can really tell you're ADHD or not.
It's almost diagnostic. Like, do you actually show up on time for your evaluation appointments?
Exactly.
Did you actually remember your appointments? Did you bring all the paperwork in? How long did it actually take you to bring all that paperwork in?
I know. The assessment itself is so un-ADHD. It's not ADHD friendly.
So you're originally from the Philippines.
Yes, I am.
And but you've lived in 6 countries, traveled to some 46 countries.
Yep.
What countries have you lived in?
So I have lived in, one, Philippines, my original home country. Shout outs to all my kababayan Filipino ADHDers. And then my ADHD itchy feet then took me to China, and then Thailand, Vietnam, and now I'm here in the US of A.
All right. So how long did you spend in each of those places? And like, what were you looking for?
Okay, so let me answer that first question. So in China, I've lived there for about 8 years. Ni hao, all those people, Chinese listeners, and then it was a whirlwind in Thailand for a month, and then Vietnam for a month, and then after that, after 1 month in Vietnam, then I moved to the U.S. I'm not counting in between those two, between China and Thailand. I lived in Australia for about 6 months.
Okay, so you were kind of globetrotting. What were you looking for?
I was looking for, I guess it was like my perfect job. Yeah.
Okay.
And as you can see, just like I live in all those countries, I was all over the place as I look for that perfect job. And also was looking for the perfect place to live in.
And have you found it yet?
Nope.
No.
I don't think it exists.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So what was it that maybe helped you come to that realization?
That there's no perfect place?
Yeah.
I think a lot my ADHD, because the ADHD only lives in 2 things. It's, speaking from like as an ADHD practitioner to another, there's always now or not now.
Right.
And I'm going to be like, just like an app or the next planner or system, after a few months, you're going to be bored with it. Oh, I forgot another country I lived in, Chile. I just remember. Right. And I got bored with those places. And I was like, always like saying, this is going to be the perfect country. I'm going to live here, fantasizing, having a great life, finding my perfect job. Nah, didn't happen.
So at what point did you recognize that there might be a pattern here?
It was actually my frustration and burnout and being literally all over the place, globetrotting, frustrating with upending and changing my life. And then you know how moving sucks.
Oh, it's the worst.
Try moving from one country to another.
Man, it was like I moved like an hour away a couple of years ago, and I was like, I'm never ever wanting to do that again.
Yeah, try 6 times or try like 3 different times in two
And
countries to space in a month.
and how does that work as a psychotherapist? Because I know that licensing is state by state.
Right. Well, I did not. Oh, you mean like how me moving to
Mm-hmm.
one? So, like, there's reciprocity. So the thing with being a psychotherapist, yes, licensing is different state to state. They really want you to stay in one state, but if I do plan to move, I will look into the reciprocity laws and go through the process all over again. Because
So how long have you been in the States then for?
I moved here 20 officially became a resident 2016.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then
and I
when
think
did you finish your schooling?
I finished my schooling in 2019.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And I think you asked me the question about when did I sense there was a pattern here.
Yeah.
And because of my journey of finding that perfect job, then just like I needed a job which just hits a lot of my interests, hits a lot of my abilities, and a huge, like a work environment. And I found like by doing 14 different jobs, was frustrating. I was angry, and everyone told me, like, why can't you just get it together? Why can't you stick to one thing? And hey, if you stick to that one thing, look where you can be in 10 years. You can be an expert. And, they were all pretty invalidating. And I got into thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can't I be like everyone else who sticks to that same job for 20 years in a company? Um, and it wasn't until like I had all these scattered notes and post-its and self-help books about jobs that I'm like, okay, there's a pattern here that I'm trying to figure out. And I can't just always be moving all the time. What's going on? I think I remember typing all these symptoms in a Google box one time, Google search. And then I was like, and then ADHD came up. And then was like a light bulb moment. I was like, oh my God, this thing exists. So I've never ever heard about it before until like I was pretty like well into the 14th job in the sixth country.
The 14th job. So you weren't necessarily doing stuff related to psychotherapy.
Nope. I was After I did this whole job inventory, I got into life coaching. And I was like, hey, I think this is a really good fit for me. And then eventually, after doing coaching, life coaching, I found that I was only treating the symptoms on the surface, but not really going in deep. And I got really interested in psychotherapy. Before that, I would not have touched counseling with like a 6 foot hot
How,
rod.
how come?
I was scared. I was like, I'm never going to be, in my head, I was like, I will never be dealing with mental health issues. They're scary. I don't want to be dealing actually with people who are like suicidal, homicidal. I was really like terrified. But it wasn't until I got into coaching that I got frustrated. I was hitting, this wall. Like, I'm not really diving in deep into what is the core issues here. And I got to know mental health as a coach, and I became fascinated. It wasn't until I started working with people that I realized that I really am drawn into mental health, and everything just clicked. And because of mental health, I got more access into ADHD. And I have heard this in a lot of among other therapists as well, who didn't know they had ADHD until they got into mental health.
It is funny how we tend to sort of attract the clients who are more like us. It just
It's true.
it really and I don't know if it's something from like that initial like conversation that you would have with a client, and there's a feeling of sort of safety and connection that might not be like just completely understood, but it's felt. So I didn't know that you started as a life coach.
I did start as a life coach, yes. And then
Interesting.
from there, yeah, and then got into psychotherapy. And I actually did not want to work with people with ADHD initially. I wanted to work with anxiety disorders. Um, and then anxiety disorders, I got into a group practice that worked with OCD, and I got fascinated with OCD. And being ADHD, I had 3 different internship sites going at the same time.
At the
And
same
then
time?
at the
Okay.
same
I
time.
was going to say, like, I had 2, but one of them was because I got fired from one. So that's why I had 2.
Oh, oh no. So, and did you do it? Did you do both at the same time, or you got
No,
fired and you went?
yeah, I did the second one because most people have their one internship during their graduate school program. 'Cause I was doing school social work. Because I was being an advocate for a student, and I didn't read the politics of the school,
Oh.
and yeah, I didn't realize how political schools really are until this happened. So it was a good lesson. But yeah, so that's why I had 2 internships in grad school.
Yeah. And then just like how for me, I'm finding out, more about myself and my ADHD. I'm more of a kinesthetic experiential learner. So before I got those 3 internships, I shadowed maybe 5 different places. Because and again, I'm sure also perfectionism was at play there. I wanted to know, because I find if it's a place I'm not interested in and the work environment is not a match, I will hate it. Every bit of my bone and have a miserable time. So
Have you seen or heard the music of Hamilton?
no.
Oh, really? Okay.
Not yet.
So, one, definitely go like see it or listen to it. Disney Plus actually has it. So like get it for a month and cancel it. There's a song in there, or Hamilton's singing about how is like he's just not satisfied. Like he always wants to have something else. There's always got to be something else. And I related to that song so much. Like, all right, like I accomplished the thing. All right, what's next? What's next? What's next?
I know. It's like you're chasing this ball. It's like your hamster wheels. Like, what's next? Like, and then so anyway, yeah, going back, I had 3 internships. One of them was in an outpatient mental health facility. We work a lot with people on Medicaid. And I had my first ADHD client there. And it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I will remember it at first. It was like our brains synced. And it didn't matter that other people, neurotypicals, would hear it and say, "Oh, he's all over the place." I'm like, I didn't really feel that way.
It's like you each are following each other in this sort of
Yep.
non-linear kind of interwoven conversation that zigs and zags and
It was glorious. And I was like, it was like, wow, that was amazing. And they loved the energy. It was like, go, go, go. And it had so many interests. And they really loved that. And I was like, I think I found my calling.
Do you think that part of why you didn't at first want to work with people with ADHD, or were you like afraid of what you were going to find, or what was it that made you not want to work with ADHD?
Not really not want to work with. I just had, it wasn't really on my mind.
Okay.
Like,
okay.
Yeah, it wasn't like, I don't want to work with them. It was just like, oh, okay, someone with ADHD. All right.
Okay.
I wanted to work, with OCD because, again, a huge part is because my ADHD. You definitely know the treatment for OCD is exposure response prevention, so ERP. And for listeners who do not know ERP, it's the gold standard treatment for OCD, where we expose you to your fears. And the theory behind that is you're often running away from anxiety, and you are what we call ritualizing. So a ritual is something that you do to manage or avoid the anxiety. So it can be like cleaning your bathroom because you're afraid it's contaminated by germs, or you click your heels 3 times because you had a very harmful thought.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
There's no place like home. Exactly. No place like home. No place like home. Yes. And they would do that. But there's OCD has so many different facets. They manifest differently, and they're truly weird and interesting. Plus, ARP is a very experiential, active exposure type treatment. So every time you go to therapy, you're not sitting down as an ADHD, you're standing up with that client. You may be like, okay, if this person is afraid of say spiders, you'd have like a spider in a box and say, all right, I'd like you to touch that spider. How do you feel about it? So every
I feel like I think you're fired. That's how I would feel about it if I but I am.
Yeah.
No. So I used to work with some clients who had OCD and phobias, and so I did some stuff like that where I was, we were putting food on the floor and eating it off the floor, and we were doing it together because I always tell my clients I would never ask them to do anything that I won't do myself. There's one session where I told him he can bring in any snack he wants to have, and we went into the back alley, went into the dumpster, and had a snack together.
Right.
And it was
Did
like,
you find that weird and exciting for me?
Right. And it was like, but it was also really exciting to see how initially his anxiety was just through the roof, that he was able to see it work in real time. It's also really cool.
Right. And then actually exposure response prevention can also be used in a way for ADHD with tasks they've been avoiding.
Yeah, with procrastination.
Yeah.
Yes.
Procrastination.
Yes.
Right.
Notice that feeling.
So with ERP, because I remember OCD has, and ADHD has a lot of comorbidities. One of them, OCD.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about sort of the cultural differences and how that sort of played out in your diagnostic process.
Sure.
All right. So we will be right back. Our coaching community is growing. The April showers are hopefully gone, which means Mayflowers will start to bloom, just like the members of our current season of coaching and accountability groups. This season, we have 4 coaching groups, which means that there are 48 people right now working together to get their ADHD rewired. Are you a long-time listener of the show? Are you in our Facebook community or our Patreon community? And have you been thinking about joining these groups for a while? Maybe you're new to the podcast and you're curious about our coaching groups. Well, we've got some good news. We've doubled our capacity for our coaching groups since January, and we are just 3 months away from starting our 25th season. So if you want to join me or our other wonderful coaches, Moira or Roxy, for our 25th season of coaching and accountability groups, don't wait. Get your name on our summer interest list by going to coachingrewired.com and click on the big red button at the top of the page. Once you've added your name, keep checking your email for your invitation to join our upcoming registration events. These registration events are by invitation only. To learn more about our award-winning intensive coaching and accountability groups, head on over to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com.
This isn't a crash course where you meet a bunch of cool people and make a bunch of brand new friends and everything's great for 10 weeks and then you go back to your regular life. This is integrating tools and new understanding about yourself that you carry on into the rest of your life. And in addition to that, not just with the A teams that we are in and the members of our group that we build relationships with that are obviously going to carry on, but that also by being part of the same mighty network as the alumni community, I already feel like I'm part of this larger continuing organization. I don't feel like I'm going to be left back to my own devices after our graduation. And I already have all these great plans and a couple relationships built with alumni community members from past group sessions. It feels wonderful.
Take the first step. Head on over to coachingrewired.com. The wait will soon be over. We are going to launch the Adult Study Hall membership community on May 20th at 12 p.m. Central. If you are anything like me, maybe you like to lay down the tracks as the train is coming. But when it comes to the Adult Study Hall community, my team and I want to make sure that we've done everything we could to make this community the best it can possibly be before our virtual doors open. Get your name added to our list by going to adultstudyhall.com. I announced our opening date last week during our live event in our secret Facebook community. So yes, we will be live and ready to rock on May 20th at noon Central. That's 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Joining the Adult Study Hall community will include Adult Study Hall on Demand, which is open to members 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Think of Adult Study Hall as your virtual coffee shop. In Adult Study Hall on Demand, you can pick your own music. When you check in, you can start by letting everyone know what you're working on. Then include the steps in your task and the target time you want to be finished. Adult Study Hall On Demand is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so you will always have a go-to space to get things on your to-do list crossed off one by one to done. Want more structure or want some guidance through your work sessions? The Adult Study Hall membership will also give you access to our Adult Study Hall Plus, ASH Plus sessions, which are themed, guided, and peer-facilitated co-working groups. One of our popular ASH Plus sessions in our alumni community is a Task Busters, and we are bringing this to the Adult Study Hall community. It's a 2-hour session where you can tackle 1 to 2 dreaded tasks you've been putting off. At the start, everyone will share what they've been dreading, what's their first step, and then the clock starts. Your ASH Plus facilitator will check in with you halfway through the session and then one more time at the end. The virtual doors are opening on May 20th. Are you on our membership list? If not, head on over to adultstudyhall.com. If you are one of the first 100 members to join the community, you are a founder and you get to lock in your membership rate at 50% off the monthly membership cost. As long as your membership stays active, your rate will never go up. Membership to the Adult Study Hall community is only $19.99 a month, which includes Adult Study Hall On Demand and access to all of our ASH Plus sessions. Go to adultstudyhall.com to add your name to the list. If you haven't done that yet, jump in and head on over now to join our brand new community where you will never have to work alone again. We're launching Thursday, May 20th at 12 p.m. Central. That's adultstudyhall.com. See you there in May. All right, and we are back. All right, so Kate, you were telling me that when you went for your evaluation, the clinician who was doing the evaluation was asking you questions like, do you interrupt a lot?
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that.
Sure. And so, I wanted to highlight how ADHD can be manifested in different cultures, and watch for a lot of factors around that. So an example is like, one of the common assessment questions with ADHD is like, do you interrupt? Do you talk over other people? And I'm Filipino, and in my culture, we are very talkative. We're very outgoing, extroverted. That's like the norm. And in my family culture, and also a lot of Filipinos, we interrupt a lot. And we also jump from one topic to another without there being like any context, like topics can just switch like, just like that.
Now, is that an actual cultural, like a common cultural thing, or is that specifically with your family?
I think, and I can't, because I haven't read any cultural research papers around this. So
Okay.
just take everything I say with a grain of salt. But my family, yes. And my friends.
Okay. But we can't necessarily say that it's a specific cultural.
I can't say it's a specific cultural thing, but there are Filipinos are, yes, quite extroverted and, talkative, as the culture.
And I think you mentioned too something about sort of the cultural expectations of being on time was another.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. So in the Philippines, that was also one of the questions in the assessment, like, are you on time? I was like, I'm like, no, but in my culture, we are often late, like an hour late. So if they say things will start at 9, you expect people at 10. Some people 2 hours. And when I meet with my friends, I don't really expect them to be on time. It's like one of those things like, let's meet at 7, but we know it's like, that's never going to happen. When I call my friends like at 7:30, I'm like, hey, where are you? They're like, we're just getting out of the house. And it'll take 2 hours to get there because of the traffic.
It makes me sort of think that for people who are listening, who maybe haven't officially got an assessment yet, if you're someone who comes from a culture where these things are the norm, that when you're being asked questions that are, because if you look in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, it always does have a sort of preface with every diagnosis that it needs to be culturally appropriate. But I think often that part gets missed.
Yeah.
Right.
And because, who makes all these assessments? Western countries.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's important as a sort of consumer advocate of mental health services for listeners if these questions that you're being asked just seem like, well, yeah, but not really. If you feel this is part of your culture, I think it's important to communicate that to the person who is doing the assessment.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I think be very mindful that person is culturally responsive as well, because having been on both sides, I feel like if I express that this is a part of my culture, and say the practitioner on the other side invalidates it, shoots me a weird look, it can feel very invalidating. I'm already going there for ADHD. I'm feeling very vulnerable already at the moment. And on top of that, if I'm invalidated because of my culture and my ethnicity, there's a high chance that I may not be coming back to that room again.
Yeah.
So, absolutely being very mindful that to express, and also be mindful if you're the practitioner to be culture responsive and open-minded. And that being said, the questions the practitioner asked me was I on time? Do I talk more than others? And do I interrupt? I was like, do I switch from one topic to another? I was like, oh, of course. It's pretty common in my family.
We also know that ADHD it runs in families.
Absolutely, yeah. But also, and I don't know because I'm ADHD, maybe a lot of my friends that are undiagnosed ADHD were also pretty common, switching from one topic to another. However, I'm talking to other Filipinos too in general. We're also pretty comfortable, in my experience, switching from one topic to another. And if you are late there, Eric, it's like no problem. You just say, oh, I just got out of the house. Like, take your time.
But now, is that just for social things, or is what if you have an actual meeting or a doctor's appointment? How does that work?
Doctor's appointment. Yeah, you'd be late. Everyone's late. And if you're on time, you're just also going to wait there for 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
In the waiting room. Yeah. Everything from of course, on paper, they're like, yes, we start on time, but I think it's in a spectrum. So classes, maybe teacher will arrive 10 minutes late, students will shuffle in, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, 15. I remember I had this like special education nuts and bolts lecture, and on paper it says 9. I got there like maybe 9:45, and then I saw this American guy storm off and said, "You said it's going to start at 9. I've been here since 8:30, and nobody's here yet."
And this where is this at?
This was in the Philippines.
This was in the Philippines. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
It's very common as the Americans storm off.
So let me ask you this. So over the last, now you were in our coaching groups. When were you in the coaching groups?
18.1.
All right. So that was about a year and a half ago, I think.
Yes.
Around.
Yeah.
So if I recall, at the time you did a mastermind, right, around some stuff around your business or your private practice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
yes.
do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Right. So from what I remember, my mastermind is I couldn't decide whether I think to pursue PhD in like cultural psychology or like build my private practice or write a novel. Basically, my mastermind was how can I do 5 different things at the same time?
Be a travel blogger. Was that one of the?
Yeah, it's like also move like in 3 different countries, live there each for a year or something like that. Yeah, but basically it's like I want to do all these things at the same time. How can I do the impossible? Hey, I have ADHD. Yeah, and your group and you have really helped me understand and see the light that when you try to catch 6 rabbits, you end up not catching any.
Yeah.
And worse so for ADHD because we have this diagnosis that lets us forget we have ADHD. And at the same time, this condition tells us like, hey, you can pursue all these 10 different things at the same time. So it's a double whammy. And you really help me be realistic by understanding my brain and telling me to do hard things, which is like, I remember I said in one of your coaching Patreon slots, I was like, I would love to work with ADHD and OCD and social anxiety. But now I'm seeing other clients with different mental health issues, such as bipolar, trauma, substance abuse. And you're like, which one would you like to do long term? I'm like, oh, hands down, ADHD, OCD, social anxiety. What are you doing now? I'm like, none of that.
And so what have you done since then?
Oh, I've taken a lot of what you said and I have just focused on my passions, which is ADHD, OCD, and social anxiety. And what's happened, because I've said that in my website, and that's the population I work with, it's like that one thing, you focus everything around it. My practice is full. I have a wait list and that's full.
I'm not surprised. That's awesome.
Right?
Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Surprised. Thank you.
Are you surprised?
I'm surprised.
Talk to me about why you're feeling surprised about that.
I know it's the imposter syndrome. It's like, because we're so conditioned, like if you spread yourself like a lot and then work with a lot of other general mental health issues, like you have a chance of growing your business. But it's like, why am I being picky and just working with these few population, primarily ADHD and OCD? But when I'm being picky and niche, I have a niche, I'm surprised people are like, oh, since she only works with a few, she must be really good with this population. Like she specializes in it. And then, the more I do work with them, I am becoming a specialist. I am a specialist.
It's funny because when I started my private practice and I was doing my clinical work, I was focusing on ADHD and autism. And now it's only ADHD. So who knows if you're going to get even more narrowly focused.
Narrowly focused. Right.
And the thing that I like, there's always in the back of my mind, I'm like, will I ever get bored of working with ADHD? And that question has been like in my mind for probably at least 6 years. Like as soon as I started the podcast, I'm like, all right, like I'm really going in deep. I haven't even felt an ounce of boredom. Like I still wonder if I'll get bored, but I think part of it is because there are so many different sort of presentations of ADHD.
Yes.
And maybe this is just speaks to the power of community, but I don't know of any other community I would even want to be a part of, because it's like, I just love our community. We are a bunch of spirited, people with big ideas, sometimes big emotions, creative weirdos, and just that sense of belonging is, it's really special, and it's really something.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I can absolutely relate to that. And here's the thing, when you're an ADHD provider, whether you're a coach, you're a therapist, you become a magnet for other ADHD people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it works, but yeah, they're attracted to you. You're a magnet.
Well, I think that part of the issue is because there are so many like bad providers out there, and not that they're bad providers, that they don't know what they're doing in the realm of ADHD.
That's what I'm going to say.
Right, like they may be good with other stuff, but like ADHD is one of these things where it's like, if the person that you're working with gets it or not, and it makes a difference. And I think that often working with a generalist when you're trying to get help for your ADHD, I think can do more harm than good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's because there are a lot of therapists who are generalists and say they work with ADHD, and an ADHD client, goes to them and then finds themselves invalidated, or they try strategies that don't work for them, and of course they become more demoralized. Their self-esteem, plummets, and as Brendan Mahan said, that wall of awful gets getting higher. And so it is important out there, if you're looking for a therapist who specializes in ADHD, to look at their website and have a consultation with them and ask them questions specific to your conditions. Like, do they know executive functions? Do they know about how dopamine affects the ADHD brain? So to your listeners out there, it is important to find a specialist in ADHD.
All right, so let's do this. Let's take a really quick break. Before we do that, can you what's your website again?
My website is kate-engel.com. That's KATE-ENGEL.com.
All right, we will be right back. Support for ADHD reWired comes from our patrons. We want to welcome 4 new patrons: Alan M. and Anita at the $3 a month level, Julie G. at the $5 a month level, and Mark R. at the $25 a month level. Thank you so much for your support. Do you want additional support and more perks from this podcast? Go on over to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon to see what else we have in store in your Patreon community. You can join our Patreon community at just $5 a month, and you can get ad-free episodes added to your podcast app. Then at $10 a month, you can listen to the audio recordings from our monthly group coaching calls, which you can access from your favorite podcast player. It's all integrated using a special link. You copy it, and it goes to your favorite podcast app, unless your favorite podcast app is Spotify. I don't think they have that available yet. But all the other apps it works with, and it's cool because it shows up just like any other podcast. I'm a Sleep With Me podcast patron, and I love getting the extra episodes right on my podcast player. Members at the $25 a month level can join me for a group coaching call every 4th Tuesday of the month. Our next patron-only group coaching call is on Tuesday, May 25th at 3 p.m. Central. That's 1 p.m. Pacific and 4 p.m. Eastern. If you are a contributing member at the $25 a month level, don't forget to register for our monthly group coaching call. That's every fourth Tuesday of the month, with the next one on Tuesday, May 25th at 3 p.m. Central. I love making this podcast and sharing with you the stories that my guests and I share with you each and every week. And while this podcast is free to listen to, it is not free to produce. Patrons help me do all the things that I need to do to help keep this podcast going and to help keep our network growing. Anything you are able to contribute, whether you're getting that dopamine hit by contributing us just a couple bucks a month, or you want to jump in our monthly group coaching calls and get all the perks at $25 a month. All amounts are appreciated. Join our Patreon community and connect with other ADHD brands over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. Every week, I am joined by 4 other podcast hosts on the ADHD Rewired podcast network. We're more than just a network. We're an ADHD family of podcast hosts who are passionate about sharing our stories and having others share theirs too. So, who are these hosts? Well, there is me, the host of ADHD Rewired. If you aren't sure or forgot who I am, hi, I'm Eric Tivers. We also have Brendan Mahan, the host of ADHD Essentials.
Hello.
It's a lot like this podcast with a focus on parents, families, and education. Visit ADHDessentials.com to learn more about Brendan and his podcast. And if you aren't already, go ahead and subscribe to his podcast on the app you're listening to this on right now. Then we have Will Curb, host of Hacking Your ADHD.
Hey there.
I personally find his show great to listen to in the morning, covering topics like our wandering minds and hyperfocus, applying what we learn, and even digital decluttering. And don't forget his moment of dad with a fantastic dad joke. They're so fantastically grown-worthy. Go to hackingyouradhd.com to learn more about Will and find show notes to each and every episode. You can also subscribe to his show on this podcast app that you're listening to this on right now. May 3rd's episode is ADHD, putting the hyper in hypersensitivity. Check out ADHD Diversified, hosted by MJ Siemens.
Hello.
She shares her experience as a Canadian-born Asian with ADHD and how that has affected the way she manages her ADHD brain. Coming this summer, possibly by the end of May, you'll get to hear MJ interview others on her podcast as well. Go to ADHDdiversified.ca to learn more, or subscribe to her podcast wherever you're listening to this on right now. And last, but certainly not least, Moira Mabin.
Hello.
Hosts her brand new show called the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle, which you can hear an episode on this podcast feed that we posted on Thursday. Moira focuses on moms, professionals, and late diagnosed women who don't want to just try harder and want to better understand their ADHD. Listen to a new episode every week from Moira and find out more about her show at ADHDfriendlylifestyle.com. You can find all of us at ADHDrewired.com by going to the podcast tab at the top of the page. Wherever you're listening to the show, go to your podcast app and subscribe to all of our shows. Hit pause. You can do it. I'll wait here. Also, did you know that you can join me and Brendan and Will and Moira every second Tuesday of the month for a live Q&A? Our next live Q&A is on Tuesday, May 11th at 12:30 p.m. Central. If you are listening to this episode on the day it came out, that means our next live Q&A is next week. That's Tuesday, May 11th at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Go to ADHDrewired.com/events to register. Find me and all of us at ADHDrewired.com and click on the podcast tab at the top of the page. Listen, subscribe, and leave us those ratings and reviews on your favorite podcast app because they help other people find this podcast and they kind of make us feel good, which we also really appreciate. And don't forget to share your favorite episodes with your friends and family. Again, go to ADHDrewired.com and click on podcasts to find all of the podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. All right, we are back. We got about 5 minutes or so left here. So one other thing we wanted to kind of touch on is, as we started this conversation with, was, travel and that itch that you have. So, and you were talking about how just having ADHD has brought so many unique experiences that have really enriched your life. Like traveling to 40 some, I mean, I don't even think I've been to that
46.
many states. I haven't even been to like that many states, let alone countries. So,
we got to jumpstart your ADHD travel. It's the best way to fulfill.
As soon as COVID is, yes, I do want to travel.
Great. I'll help you with your travel itinerary and all that.
I will accept that offer.
All right. Awesome.
All right. So talk to us about your travel itch.
Yeah. So before knowing this diagnosis, I've always had that utmost feeling of boredom and restlessness. And that boredom and restlessness has driven me to discover so many different cultures, people, countries. And I forgot, like Mark Twain said something that how travel can broaden your perspective. And travel has been such a huge gift for me, from knowing that people have different perspectives, the way of looking at things, ethnicities, history. And I'm very thankful for my ADHD, though it has given me a lot of frustrations, wall of awful, imperfection. But if it wasn't for my ADHD, I wouldn't be here right now talking to you. I would not have met my husband, who I've met because I was too adventurous. I wouldn't have met so many people, formed these great friendships, and I would not have had this life purpose of mine of serving the ADHD community, and also really advocating that ADHD can be manifested in manifest differently in various cultures, and to be aware of that, and how, people out there who are not from the US, if you do not have those resources, this podcast is free. And there's a lot of other ADHD websites you can get help that's low cost. And know that you're not alone out there.
I did a quick Google search for Mark Twain travel quotes.
Yes, so, you got it.
All right, so tell me if this is the one. Okay. And it seems very, very timely. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime.
Absolutely. I think that may be it. Yeah, it's especially in this period of Black Lives Matter, travel has really enriched perspectives in the protests, in social justice, why we have conversations about the color of our skin, and really understand where people are coming from. I encourage those who have ADHD, who have really itchy feet after COVID, to safely travel and go out there. Let your ADHD know no bounds, because you don't know where it will take you. Maybe the love of your life or your life's purpose.
That might be a great place to end right there.
I think so too.
Kate, thank you so much for sharing your story and some of your experiences. And I really, really wish you all the best. And I'm so glad to know that there's a therapist in Pennsylvania who really understands ADHD. The website again, it's Kate-Engel, Engel. We'll put the link on the show notes for this episode. Kate, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eric.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is adhdrewired.com. You can find summaries and additional resources for each episode. You can apply to our free and secret Facebook community. You can learn more about ADHD Rewired's intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at adhdrewired.com. While you're there, click the Patreon button. If you're a regular listener and you're still listening to my voice, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to listeners, but it is not free to produce. And patrons get really cool perks. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. You can also subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube. And you can subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube and see select interviews and some other videos I've posted. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends and your family and your clients, as well as your coaches, therapists, and doctors. And if you're a coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader, and you would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at my website, adhdrewired.com. And if you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this podcast. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. You know, you might be the person that turns somebody on to a podcast for the very first time. And if you really love this episode, please consider hitting share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and to help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, or any other podcast app that accepts ratings and reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe on this podcast on your podcast app so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Not sure where to start? In no particular order. Check out Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 10% Happier, and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you have trouble asking for help? Listen to The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever heard. If you're looking for something a little bit more, say, magical, I unexpectedly fell in love with the Harry Potter series. And I don't usually listen to those kinds of books, and I loved it. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus yet, check out Brene Brown's books, starting with The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader in any capacity, check out her 2018 book, Dare to Lead. And Brene still is my most wanted guest, so if you know Brene, and you would be so kind to make that connection for me, I would be really, really grateful. You know who else I would like to have on the show? You. Click the podcast tab at adhdrewired.com and then click the Be a Guest button at the top of that page and schedule a 15-minute pre-interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting. Self-care is not selfish, and no matter what gets done or doesn't get done, at the end of the day, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.